Caleb Bond, I'm going to go to you first off, and we're going to run a montage of some of these front pages tomorrow, because this is getting scary. This is getting to the point where, you know, of course we have to be alert. We don't have to be particularly alarmed right now in Australia, although there has been another confirmation of a coronavirus victim on the Gold Coast earlier tonight, and we'll get to that story very, very shortly. So we look at the Australian life at ground zero like bad school holidays. That's the headline there, as the Australian speaks to a couple of students who are basically trapped in Wuhan in China, which is the epicentre of this particular virus. And if you head, of course, to the Daily Telegraph, the headline there is Island Fortress amid a rising death toll, spiralling rates of infection and a plan to airlift Aussies from China and place them in quarantine on Christmas Island, Adelaide, can be expected. The Island Fortress, Aussie virus evacuees new isolation, a stunning airlift of hundreds of Australians stuck in China's coronavirus ground zero is being planned by the Australian government, which would then house evacuees in isolation on Christmas Island. And of course, if you head to papers like the Sydney Morning Herald, emergency flight to virus epicentre, that's another one. The Age, trapped Australians may reject rescue bid. That's another front page. And of course, the papers continue. The West Australian has a particularly interesting front page. Isolation for Aussie evacuees, Island of the Damned. That's the headline on the front of the West Australian. Detention centre to house China travellers as locals vent fury at leper colony solution. Caleb, this is a massive challenge for the World Health Organization. It's a massive challenge for Xi Jinping, the Chinese communist leader. In fact, I saw something earlier tonight suggesting that it was his most challenging political situation since taking over in 2012. What are your thoughts on this, Caleb?
Look, I've no doubt it is challenging for China, but I have to say their response to it so far has been pretty good. I mean, for heaven's sake, if they can build a 1,000-bed hospital in a matter of about 4 days, meanwhile in South Australia we built the most expensive hospital in the world with about 700 beds, fewer beds than the hospital it replaced, and it took us about 3 or 4 years to build that. I've got to say they're doing a pretty good job, and they're certainly doing a better job than our government has done. I'm glad to see that they're finally pulling the finger out, but I think the response over the last week or so has been pretty meek and mild. There has been conflicting advice from various people in the health profession as to how concerned we should be about this. Schools had to take it into their own hands, and universities, to tell people who had been to China recently not to come in for 2 weeks. And you know, to see if they develop any symptoms, because they could be at risk. Meanwhile, you've got the Education Minister on the radio on Tuesday morning as people are going back to school saying there's nothing to worry about. Kids, go back to school, doesn't matter whether you've been to China or not, you're not at risk. The message has been fragmented, and I don't think the risk of coronavirus was taken as seriously as it should have been. Today, the government has changed tune on that, thank heavens. I had a column in the Advertiser today basically saying, where are you and why is the message on this so all over the place? It's good to see some clarity finally. We need to do everything we can, obviously, for Australians who are in China, and getting them out of there and into quarantine as soon as possible is the right thing to do, but I don't think we realised, or the government certainly didn't realise, exactly how dangerous this could be on the ground here. I mean, we let a plane into Australia that had left Wuhan 4 hours before they declared an emergency over there, and all we did when they landed in Sydney was give them the once over and say, oh, well, you look all right, we'll let you in. I mean, the fact that we didn't quarantine them for some period of time seems ridiculous. But look, I'm glad we finally picked up on how serious this is, and one hopes that there aren't too many more cases discovered in Australia, because it seems like one hell of a virus.
Ollie, Caleb makes a very good point there about the fragmentation and the dislocation in their response. And here in Queensland, the education authorities have been sort of very ad hoc in the way they've been urging parents to, you know, basically take it upon themselves to put their kids into 14-day isolation if they've been to China over the summer period. Whereas in New South Wales, they've taken a zero-tolerance approach and said if your child was in China, or you as a family were in China over the summer break, don't come near us for 14 days. I think somehow along the, somewhere along the line, you know, whether it's at a COAG, you know, a health minister's COAG or something, there needs to be a national response to something like this, doesn't there?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, Gleeson, and as Caleb said, the fragmented approach at the moment from various state governments, various public school systems, private school systems. It played out here in Western Australia yesterday as well, with the private schools in the morning saying the 14 days stay away. The State Education Department hadn't made up its mind, and it said maybe 10 days. Then by the end of yesterday, it was 14. So it has been a very mixed message and confusing message over the last week or so. And that's exactly what we need here is national leadership. It needs to be coordinated from the Federal Education Minister, from the Federal Health Minister, and then ultimately, of course, the decisions are made by the Prime Minister. So now we all need to be on the same page. But where we have, you know, various issues popping up now, somebody's tested positive in Victoria as well to having coronavirus. People have been warned if they're at a certain Glen Waverley restaurant on Sunday night on Australia Day that they may also have come in contact with this particular gentleman and they might be at risk of developing coronavirus. So where does it start? Where does it end? You know, this bloke might have got off an aeroplane when he went home and he caught a taxi. Is that taxi driver and that taxi now at risk? And I don't want to sound alarmist, but you've got the Chinese women's soccer team at the moment hauled up in a hotel in Brisbane. They came over here to play the Matildas after the game was shifted from Wuhan back to Australia. Now they're in quarantine for the next 14 days. What about the person who's coming to their room tomorrow to deliver room service? Do they knock and run?
Yep.
Do they leave it at the front door? What happens? These are all very serious and legitimate questions. I don't want to be hysterical about it, but how far can this virus spread and how safe is everybody, you know, in coming into contact with people who might have it?
Ollie, you are not being hysterical. You have a very reasonable position on this particular problem because there are a lot of people in this country right now who are wondering, you know, whether in fact this is going to escalate, particularly parents of kids whose, and we know that there's a massive Chinese population of students, whether it be in tertiary or primary or you know, wherever they are. So, you know, your concerns are legitimate.